Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to our random review. Today's random review is from 1969, and it's Don't Let the Angels Fall. This is another Canadian International Pictures release, one of the Vinegar Syndrome sister labels. You're going to suffer whether you like the idea of it or not. That is a quote from the film, not just a warning of the contents of this video. I do have to admit that I now have an addiction to Canadian International Pictures, as well as Deaf Crocodile. Again, as I've said before, I'm not really a huge fan of the kind of films that Vinegar Syndrome put out, but some of their sister labels are certainly fascinating, and Canadian International Pictures is certainly one of them. So this film is directed by George Kazender, who originally from Hungary but became a Canadian citizen as a political refugee. Made a bunch of films for the National Film Board of Canada, and did some Hollywood films, went to London, did some films, came back, and ended up being a professor at USC. Some of his American films are stuff like The Boy Nobody Wanted, Where Are My Children, Maternal Instincts, Indiscretion of an American Wife, those kind of titles. But this is his debut feature, and this absolutely blew me away. It stars Arthur Hill, who you can see this wonderful drawing of on the slipcover. He's probably more famous for being one of the lead scientists in the Andromeda strain. One of those guys who always kind of plays kind of figures of authority, if you will, or fairly kind of straight, stiff characters. So in this one he plays a businessman who's had an affair while he was off for 3 months learning about computer programming in 1969, but he came back after a month and a half, and how his guilt is kind of affecting the rest of his family, his wife, and his 2 sons, one of which is a student at university. And again, with films of this age, he's part of the student political movement against the Vietnam War, against Canada's involvement in the Vietnam War, sending troops to help out and stuff like that. And he's going out with a singer, and their 13-year-old guy, who is struggling at school because he just doesn't see the point of it, and he looks to his father as kind of, well, what's the point of going to school if you end up being like him. This is a 2K restoration, even though it looks like a 4K. It's one of the best prints on Blu-ray I've ever seen. You could be mistaken for actually thinking it's a 4K, but it is actually just a Blu-ray. And as always, you do get a nice booklet as well, with a couple of essays and of course images from the film. Now again, on the surface of it, this is a film that shouldn't really blow me away or shouldn't really be interesting to me. You know, how many films do we have about people having affairs and blah blah blah? As usual, in my planet we don't have things like marriage, and if you do agree to be married, then you shouldn't really be having affairs with people. if you can't do the time, don't do the crime. In this case, getting married and having kids. But the film starts off in striking fashion, with black on white titles interspersed with shots of the neighbourhood, including somebody's dog being run over. And we see Arthur Hill in bed with his wife. But every time he closes his eyes, he sees this younger, more attractive woman than his wife, and him looking like a completely different person and happy and not as closed down as he's spending time with this woman. And it's a really nice device because you can tell no matter what situation he's in, he's got her on his mind, because again the flashbacks keep coming. So again, I think if this was kind of done straight, if you like, this film wouldn't have a lot of interest for me, but because the characters are really quite interesting, even the two sons, which doesn't always happen in these kind of films, and again just the techniques that Kazender uses, the flashbacks mixing real protests, using freeze frame, using pictures, it always makes material interesting. And for a film that's 99 minutes long, I would have actually preferred it to be longer, because you actually want to spend more time with these disturbed people. And again, also one of the things that kind of sets off this character, Robert, played by Arthur Hill, is he's stopped on his way to work by a TV crew, and they've set up these pictures, and they're just asking members of the public to walk around and have a look at the pictures, and then at the end they ask them a question of what's missing in the pictures, which you'll have to watch the film to figure out, or unless you can figure it out for yourself. But there's like a picture of Neville Chamberlain waving his favourite bit of paper, and next to that is the famous picture of the wee boy being rounded up by the Nazis. There's a picture of Dr. King, and the picture next to it is his widow. There's a picture of a murdered woman lying in the street, and next to it's a picture of a man looking out of his window. So at the end of this, when Robert's asked what's missing, he talks about, maybe the inherent violence is missing, and he's kind of bewildered by the whole thing. So that kind of upsets his way of thinking. We do find out that Robert's on medication. He works in a kind of, I'm not exactly sure, but it's one of those cubicled places where he has his office, but you can see into everybody else's office. He's perturbed that the guy in the office next to him is obviously having an affair with his secretary, even though obviously he had an affair with somebody on this computer programming course. And his secretary, she keeps talking about how when he came back from this course, she can't recognise him and he's not the same person. There's just wonderful dialogue. It's a fantastic script. He has conversations with his 13-year-old about the point of education, because the kid, who's obviously smart, just doesn't see the point of it. And he's talking about how, staying in education just gives you ability to make a choice or make choices. The mother has a great scene with the 13-year-old as well, when again she uses that wonderful quote, "You're going to suffer whether you like the idea of it or not, so you just have to deal with the stuff that life throws at you." His mother and father didn't come to this point by choice. They just had to, mistakes were made, and missed opportunities happen and you end up where you are and you just have to kind of deal with it. It's a wonderfully bleak film, which is maybe why I loved it so. I mean, it's one of my films of the year that I've watched. As I said, all the characters are really fascinating, even though, again, it's a story we've seen countless times, and it's fairly predictable in the sense that you kind of know that at the end of the day he's probably not going to leave his wife for the younger version, if you like, and the implications of that. Again, there's nothing too dramatic that happens, but I suppose there are things that happen near the end of the film that I guess if you're a parent you could view as dramatic. It's just an absolute stunner. Again, partly because of the way it looks, partly because of the techniques that Kazander implements to make it much more interesting than perhaps you could argue that basic story is. It's a wonderful release because you also get 7 of Kazander's short films for the National Film Board of Canada, but 5 of them are like 28 minutes long, so it's almost like a TV episode, and they're actually shorts that you would go back and watch again, because let's be honest, a lot of these kind of physical media releases, when they add shorts, a lot of the short films you're never actually going to watch again, but these are actually very good. You've got Ballerina from 1964, which is 28 minutes, which strangely enough is about the life of a ballerina. That's more of a documentary. You have from 1964 Phoebe, which is 28 minutes, which is a film about teenage pregnancy. You're No Good from 1965, which is 28 minutes, starring Michael Safarian, who's supposed to be playing an 18-year-old, but he was actually 25 when he made it, which is really good. Little White Crimes from 1966, which is 28 minutes long, about a young businessman who is projecting the image of being rich and wealthy, but he owes money everywhere, and the net's closing. And The Game from 1968, which is also 28 minutes, which is again about teenagers chasing young girls to take their virginity, and it's kind of a look at the teenage machismo, but at the end of the day what's actually the point of that game. You also get a couple of 8-minute ones, Impressions of Expo 67, strangely enough from 1967, which is actually in colour, and Toys from 1967, which is 8 minutes, which is again in colour. Everything else on the disc is in black and white. And Toys is absolutely wonderful. It's like 5 children looking at the toys in a window, lots of Action Man, which I had myself as a kid, but then they come to life and pretty much go to war and there's carnage, and you just see still shots of the children's faces as it turns into all-out war. It's actually a brilliant little film for 8 minutes. And again, you get the booklet, which also features a bit on Timothy Findlay, who was a novelist who wrote the script. And again, the script is just so good, and the performances are all excellent, especially with Arthur Hill, who again is another one of those guys that the name doesn't really mean much, but you recognise his face. I mean, obviously from the Drama Strain, but he was in Petulia and The Killer Elite and A Bridge Too Far and Future World, and he's just one of those faces. But for me, this was an absolute stunner. Again, on paper, not a film that I should really like, but I absolutely loved it just by the way it was done. And again, with the political unrest and the backdrop, as a kind of talked about in the earlier video with Canadian International Pictures, with Gina and Dirty Money. It's just another sensational release, and yes, I am now addicted to Canadian International Pictures as well as Deaf Crocodile, so no doubt Vinegar Syndrome will be very happy. But it's not my fault, because these films are fascinating and really quite excellent. But I would highly recommend Don't Let the Angels Fall, because for me it's one of my watches of the year. So thanks so much for watching. Please let me know if you've seen Don't Let the Angels Fall and what you think of it. And hopefully you'll join me again for more random reviews. And I'll try not to make them all C.I.P. or Deaf Crocodile. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.